As of late, the Pokemon franchise has had very mixed reception, to say the least. And sure, while none of the games are total unplayable abominations or anything, nearly every fan agrees that the series was better in the past. This leaves us with a question though: when did the decline start? Some say it was when Pokemon made the jump to the Switch with Sword and Shield, others as soon as Gen 5. To be fair though, as time has gone on, not quite as many people point to Black and White anymore, or hardly anyone, and it suffers with none of the problems of newer games. The game now that a lot of people point to the first quote-unquote bad Pokemon game is X and Y for a 3DS. On one hand, I can kinda see why, especially as the dividing line between new and old. It was the first Pokemon game to use 3D models instead of sprites, is incredibly easy, has a lot of Gen 1 pandering, etc. To be honest, I really don't remember too much else about it, only that I had a really fun time playing it a few years ago. So which is it? Was this the beginning of the end, the last classic Pokemon game, or something completely different? Well, let's dig in. So there's not a big flashy intro this time. I mean, it's flashy and cool, but a big downgrade from Black and White. For our main characters this time we've got Calum and Serena, one of which has almost completely been forgotten, and the other one being the most widely known character, one of the most widely known characters in the series. Poor Calum. Pretty much immediately upon starting the game, there is one glaring, unmissable major change from Gen 5. This was again the first generation to make the switch from sprites to 3D models, although there are tons of spin-offs that came before this like Coliseum or Stadium that also used 3D models. At the time, this was a change that a lot of people were excited for. Nowadays though, there's a large number of fans who miss the 2D graphics. The sprites just have so much more life and personality to them, and I don't know, just have this warm feel. But it doesn't matter how fans feel, because this was a change that was going to happen no matter what. At least they made the switch at a good time, and did it right. All the characters look pretty close to the style of the concept art of earlier games, and they didn't go down a route of trying to make everything as realistic as possible. That being said, there are a few things I feel are a bit unfinished, like how every trainer, almost every trainer, doesn't even have a close-up 3D model in battle, instead just a static image. I understand how much time and money was being spent to make most of these models from scratch, but it contrasts with the rest of the game's visuals by a lot. With the elephant in the room out of the way, the cast of characters is overlooked in my opinion. First, there's Professor Sycamore. Well, to be honest though, he's probably not the best example since he's just juniperly male. What I do like is how after the intro, the player doesn't meet him for a good couple of hours into the game. Instead, the people guiding them are the rivals, or more accurately, friends. And you get 4 of them, which is a little overkill to be honest. The first of them is the opposite gendered avatar of what you chose, in the same vein as May and Brennan in Gen 3. If you choose to play as Calum, it's Serena, and if you choose Serena, you get Calum, you know the deal. Either way, they're kinda boring, with a very bland personality, have very little chemistry with the other characters, and just overall have no unique personality traits or goals or anything. The other 3 are a lot more interesting, although they're still lacking a little bit. Shauna is the stereotypical feminine girl who cares more about cute Pokemon than winning battles. Tierno is fun, but isn't really much of a competitive battler either, only caring about dancing. He's also one of the only fat characters in the series too. I know that doesn't really have any correlation to the story or anything, I know, but it's, how is he fat? He gets a lot of walking, and there's no one else that's fat. You know what, forget it. Trevor is a smart one, already knowing a lot about battling, being a lot like Chirin. He's only fought once by himself, and doesn't really show up very often alone. I'm kind of conflicted on whether I like or dislike the group. They aren't very interesting and are pretty one-dimensional and aren't really very competitive either, yet the group dynamic has its moments. It does bring you back to being a kid and hanging out with friends. If these guys were better written and had more moments to shine, they might go down as some of the greatest rivals in the series. The oddest moment in the whole story is during a visit to Parfum Palace. Here the player runs into Shauna again. They work together to find this rich guy's Forfro, and then the two have an emotional moment together, I guess. The music though, is a very good track. Like, this track makes me feel something that I hardly ever feel. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a mix of romance, nostalgia, and sadness. However, this scene feels just a little out of place because, for one, it takes place super early on in the game. Two, there's not really any more romance or moments between the player and Shauna again. And three, the music never plays after this. It makes me wonder if the developers planned for Shauna and Calum to have some kind of romance that got scrapped. Although I do wonder what happens if you chose to play Serena. I assume the same thing happens anyway, but if someone knows, put it in the comments or something. And, this music, I really like the music, so I'm gonna talk a little longer so it can keep playing. I have a permanent marker on me right now. There's an annoying freaking car in the background right now, or whatever that thing was. It was a truck. Thank you. Oh, and it's doing that too. Yeah. Recording really sucks, and it's really hot out, so I make all these clicking noises with my mouth. Okay, I think the music's been going on long enough. Let's move on. But yeah, it's a really good track that I love. Alright, I've done enough critiquing for a while, so let's take a look at one of the best things Gen 6 did. The starters. They're all strong with dual typing, look cool, or at least Greninja does, and I just love them. The fire starter is Fennekin, which is supposed to be a fox, I think. It evolved into Breaksin, which it has a lot of Rule 34 of it. And please don't ask how I know that. I swear I wasn't looking for... The final evolution is Delphox. And when it does evolve, it gains a Psychic typing, which comes in handy a lot. Then there's Chespin, the grass starter. I'm not exactly sure what it's supposed to be, but it evolves into Quililin and then to Chestnut, and it gains fighting. And thank God it's on him and not Breaksin or Delphox, because just look at how many firefighting types we've had up to this point. Like, you had Blaziken and Infernape and Emboar, so it's really good that wasn't another fire type this time. The most popular of the three is without a doubt Froakie, and its later evolutions, Fergider and Greninja. I mean, he's one of the only Mons to make it to Smash, which might not be saying much since just goddamn Jigglypuff made the cut. For its typing, Greninja's dual Water Dark, a useful combination that matches its design, which is awesome, and probably why the line became so popular. And also, the scarf you see on it, that is actually its tongue, so yeah, that's a bit disgusting. Like I've tried to do for most of these playthroughs, I used all 3 starters on my team. To be honest, most of the time I don't plan for this, it's just I already usually have one starter and a copy of the game I already played before, I buy another copy of the game to see what it's like, and that copy usually has a starter that's different than my first playthrough, so I trade it over before deleting the old save file. Breed new ones, choose the last starter I don't have on my new playthrough, then trade the other 2 over. On one hand, it does make the game a lot more complete and fun, but on the other, it doesn't leave much room for other team members. It makes the game a complete joke towards the end. That's not all though, because it's actually possible to not only get a second starter, after you beat the game, but a Kanto starter as well. I feel like I've said the word starter so much that it's not even a word anymore. Getting a Kanto starter isn't even hard or anything. Professor Sycamore just straight up hands one out. I chose Charmander because of course I did. Yeah, it is a bit generic and boring, and it is a bit redundant having a second fire type on my team, but come on, it's fucking Charizard. My other 2 team members aren't anything super special, just a Golurk and a Meowistic. The latter of which is named after another character because I started this tradition where I name my psychic types after Earthbound characters for some reason. I really did like using both of them though. New Pokemon are of course a staple to every new mainline installment, typically introducing anywhere from 100 to 150. Unfortunately, because of all the resources that had to be directed to making all the 3D models and such, the devs couldn't really create that many new Pokemon. Kalos only has 72 new Pokemon. A bit disappointing to be sure. Yeah, it can still be worked around. After all, there are over 600 different Pokemon up to this point, many of which a lot of people forgot about. So, taking some forgotten or underutilized Pokemon and placing them throughout Kalos could have somewhat fixed this issue. And they did kind of do this, with there being a lot of Pokemon brought back from other regions, and they're a lot more common here than, let's say, Ruby and Sapphire or Diamond and Pearl. But there's one region that's favored over the rest, heavily. Kanto. This is it. This is where all the Gen 1 pandering began, albeit not to the extent it would be later on. Kanto Mons take up a huge amount of the roster, which isn't a bad thing exactly, just a little tiring to some. To be honest, I wrote a bare bones version of the script before playing the game again, and then polished it on it as I played through it, and I have to say though that, voicing this over right now, that the Kanto pandering isn't nearly as bad as I remembered it being. I mean, it is, Kanto is unfairly treated compared to Johto and Sinnoh and the rest, but, I thought it was way worse before playing through it again, so, yeah. Enough about Kanto though, it's time we talk about this region, Kalos. It takes heavy influence from France, with Lumiose City, the largest city of the game, being a futuristic version of Paris. But unlike France, Kalos has a lot more geographic diversity, with deserts and tundra, making a kind of circular map, with Lumiose at the center of it all. Kalos isn't a bad region by any means, but it did get kind of dirty with a lack of content. There isn't as much to do compared to previous regions, and a few places don't really lead anywhere, like this door at the electric plant. Likely, a lot more stuff would have been in the third version of the game, originally planned, Pokemon Z. It's never been confirmed to my knowledge if Z actually ever got into development, but it's pretty likely that it probably existed at some point because, one, all the unfinished content I mentioned, the anime had a season called XYZ, well that's 2, I forgot to say 2 before that, and 3, it feels really odd for something to be called X and Y and then having there be no Z. Well, I guess X and Y sounds better than like Y and Z. But still, it just doesn't sound right to say X, Y without Z. For some odd reason though, X and Y never got a third version or any other follow-up since. Which really sucks because with how Platinum and Emerald improved upon their original games, it could have been so amazing. I mean, I still really like this game, but... Oh, stupid freaking card. I almost had it. You know what? Screw that. I'm tired. I'm keeping that. Anyway, I do really like this game, but again, Z would have been spectacular. This actually might go up people's lists and stuff, and it might have been a pretty popular game if Z had come out, so... It does suck that it never did. There are a lot of fears and stuff, but the most likely one is that they moved on to Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, and then after they're done with it, they wanted to move on to Sun and Moon, and by that point, it was like, what's even the point now? At least that's my fear, and that's what I've heard a few other people say. When it comes to gameplay, not much is super different, which is understandable, since A, how much work went into creating the first installment on a new console, making the switch to 3D graphics only like 2 years, and B, there wasn't much to improve upon with the near perfection that Gen 5 was. Even so, there's still quite a bit of new stuff, and a few changes here and there. Gen 6 is the first installment to create a new type since Gen 2, the Fairy type. Fairy type moves are super effective against fighting, dark, and most important of all, dragon. Up to this point, the only moves that Dark was weak to was Bug and Fighting, and Dragons were only weak to Ice and other Dragon-type moves. The addition of the Fairy type added a better balance typing, which not only gave more weaknesses to Dark, Fighting, and Dragons, but also gave Steel, and more importantly, Poison types new uses. Before that, Poison was only super effective against Grass, and since quite a few Grass types are dual Grass Poison, it was never really that useful, so this buff is nice. With a little over 70 new Pokemon at Kalos, unless half of them are Fairy types, it really wouldn't make that much of a difference. Instead, a lot of Pokemon are retroactively changed to be dual whatever type they were before and Fairy, like Jigglypuff, Azumarill, Clefairy, Togepi, and Gardevoir, and a lot of ones that I don't have footage of. To do something like this so late in the series was a bold move, and I think ultimately paid off in the long run. It's too bad though if I didn't have one of them on my team to be a fairy type for this video, but oh well. If you like customization of how your avatar looks, you can do that too. There are a number of different hats and clothing to choose from, but to be honest, I like the way Kalos looks from the start, so I didn't buy too much clothing or change my look at all. And that's how I feel about a lot of the bonus content in this game. Yeah, it's cool, but not really anything I'm interested in. Lumiois is chocked full of this kind of content. You got all the fashion shops, and then you also have verb shops, and you got the battle mansion, you got this hotel, and you got what else you got? A crap ton of cafes, Pokemon centers, but that's a given. And just a lot of other stuff I don't care about. And there's also like mini games on the touchscreen that you can play too, which are fun too. Then after that, there's this Battle Chateau or whatever it's called. Yeah, I'm gonna pull what its actual name is on the screen, but my script, I forgot to write this part of the script, so I'm just doing it with improv. But anyway, this place you can actually fight gym leaders here and a bunch of other trainers, and it's just really fun. I really like it. You gain access to it really early on, and it's pretty much the only place I'm using towards the end of the game, so that's cool. To be honest, while I have been complaining a lot in this video, I really do like this game, and I've had a lot of fun playing it. It's just a lot of the interesting things to talk about for a video like this are just mostly negative, and stuff that I really enjoy, like the rain and routes, farming berries, and just having mundane fun fighting trainers, doesn't really make that great of content. So I'm sorry for being so negative in this video. Again, I really do like this game, a lot more than it probably sounds like I do. With that stated, it's about time I talked about what I think is the biggest issue of X and Y. For one, that makes people think of it as boring or meh. The game is too easy. Trainers are a lot lower leveled relative to you. The AI is dumb, and if you have a nerve for fighting every trainer, it doesn't take long to get over leveled. Then add on top of that the XP share, which works much different than before. Before, the XP share is a hold item that will give Pokemon holding it half the XP after defeating an enemy, even if they're never used in battle. In X and Y, the XP share works sort of like it did in Red and Blue, only with a major buff. The Pokemon used get normal XP, with each Pokemon not used get half of the XP. This makes leveling up quickly very easy, which can be useful, especially if you want to level up a weak Pokemon without the expense of the rest of your team. But it's just a little too overpowered. Thankfully, you can turn it off, which I did fairly early on because my party was getting so powerful that nothing was a challenge for it. At certain points, I felt like Saitama from One Punch Man, using my weakest moves just to give my opponents time to at least do something before getting mopped. Of course, it really didn't help that half my Mons were traded, and that makes them level up faster. Again, this isn't all bad. It's the perfect Pokemon game for a kid playing a series for the first time. And if you wanted to, you could probably have a rotating team of 7 or 8 or even more members without having any of them be under-leveled. If you use the system to your advantage, it opens up the door to a lot of possibilities that would be hard to achieve in older installments. Play it exactly like those other games and it gets a little boring at times. Some other things were tweaked as well, like while Pokemon give out XP points when they're caught, multiple items can be registered to Y, multiple Pokemon can be encountered at once in horde battles, although they suck since you can only throw Pokeballs at one of them if one of them is left, and the game has massive slowdown problems during them. And you get to use these sweet skates. They're a slight bit more convenient to use than the bikes since instead of equipping them to Y, you activate them by moving with the circle pad, and if you feel like just walking, use a D-pad. To finish off this part of the video, we have the biggest mechanic of Gen 6 after the graphics, Mega Evolution. Certain stones can be collected, being named after a certain Pokemon. If that Pokemon holds that corresponding stone during battles, it can evolve even further for a short time. During this time, we have boosted stats, and maybe a different typing too. It's a sweet mechanic, but I wish more trainers had Mega Evolved Pokemon. It doesn't help that very few Pokemon have Mega Evolved forms. although that's totally understandable. It does suck though how the only member of my team that was able to Mega Evolve was Charizard. On top of that, this game is already super easy, so Mega Evolution doesn't really have that much purpose. At the very least, it did come back in ORAS, and Gen 7, with some improvements too. Gym leaders, unfortunately, are another letdown, at least compared to those in Black and White. Here, most of them don't really do much outside of their gym, and on top of that, I don't know, they don't really stand out or feel memorable. The first of the bunch is Viola. She has this photographer personality, I guess. She uses bug types. Not only that, but she only has a level 10 Surskit and a level 12 Avilion. Yeah, she's by far the easiest gym leader in the franchise. Next is Grant. He uses rock types and is boring. I creamed him, and there's not really much to note about him. Well, I guess the waterfall in his gym is pretty relaxing, but that's pretty much it. The only gym leader with any personality or role in the story whatsoever is the fighting type leader of Shadowlore City, Karina. Not only that, but she probably has the most prominent role in the story than any other gym leader almost. The first time you see her, she's trekking through Route 5 with her 2 Lucarios, and one of them takes a liking to the player. Later on, she's fought once, even before the gym match, then battled once again in her gym, and then one more time at the Tower of Mastery, which is also the first Mega Evolution battle in the game. She has a fairly fleshed out personality, being energetic, bubbly, friendly, all that good stuff. The contrast between Karina and her peers is night and day. It's like the devs spent the whole gym leader budget on her, and then ran out of time for the rest. And to top things off, Karina even gives the player the Lucario that took a liking to them. After all that build up and emotion, what do I end up doing with him or her? I forgot which gender it is. I just put them away in a PC box literally right after and never used it ever again. What really sucked for me the first time I played this was not knowing about this gift and working really hard into raising a Railu until it evolved. And then I ended up not even using that anyway. After Karina is Remus, a creepy old gardener guy, and then Clement, one of the most iconic characters of X and Y, but mostly because of the anime. Here, he really doesn't do all that much outside of his gym. He's an inventor, uses electric types, and is basically Jeff from Earthbound, only he's French instead of British. Following up is Valerie with her fairy types, succeeded by Olympia and her psychic types, and to finish things off, there's Wolfric and his ice types. Well, it's that part of the video. The evil team. This time, Team Flare. In Kano and Johto, you had Team Rocket, a mob that didn't really have any real goal other than power and money. In Hoenn, there's Team Aqua and Magma, whose goal is to change the world to make more room for either water or land Pokemon. In Sinnoh, there's Team Galactic, whose goal is to erase the motherfucking universe. And in Unova, Team Plasma's initial goal was to liberate Pokemon. So, what's Team Flare's goal? To destroy the world again. Team Flare's goal is very confusing, to be honest. They want to recreate the world basically, and cause all sorts of trouble around Kalos. As for their leader, Lysander, he's kind of a twist villain. Early on you don't know what to think of him, and since he's not really made out to be a villain or an ally, you kind of forget about him for a while. Lysander hates the current world, just like the rest of us, and has a Thanos-like mindset, and has plans to use a super powerful ancient weapon to destroy everyone that isn't part of Team Flare. Lysander eventually finds a way to activate this weapon, which has a crazy and frankly confusing backstory. 3,000 years ago, a massive war engulfed the world, and this weird guy, who was a king back then but is somehow still alive, built a super awesome machine to bring a Pokemon killed by the war back to life, and then turned it into a weapon to end the war. You know, this legit might actually be the darkest piece of lore in Pokemon, and yet I hear no one ever talk about it, that potentially millions of people just died, and it falls under everyone's radar. My guess is because it happened in the past, you don't really see much of it outside of the story, but still, I mean, with how Lavender Town went crazy, I'm surprised there aren't any creepypastas or elaborate fan fictions about this war. But anyway, Even darker, the machine uses the life force of Pokemon. His floatee finds out about it, leaves him, and ever since he's been wandering the land looking for it. Not a bad backstory or anything, although it is a little convoluted. And this AZ King guy, while he does show up once or twice, he should have had the same presence as N. I do dig how dark it is though. But despite all your efforts, the weapon gets activated anyway and is ready to fire. The weapon is powered by the box legendary, either Zarinus or Yvital, whatever the pronunciation is, because no one can apparently agree online. So you need to either defeat or catch them, which is easy, and I mean easy. I was getting ready for a long and challenging battle for a change, but instead, I got it with one quick ball, so that was kind of anticlimactic. It's not quite over yet though. Lysander comes into some stupid headgear for some reason, eager for one last battle. He's actually strong, well I mean compared to the rest of the game. For the first time in a journey, I had multiple Pokemon faint, and I was really looking forward to how challenging his last Pokemon would be, a Mega Evolved Gyarados, only no, I one-shot it with one Seed Bomb, so that was kind of anticlimactic. Lysander, unlike Thanos, doesn't take his defeat well, firing the weapon anyway. Everyone but Lysander evacuates the facility right in time to avoid that death laser falling back on the facility, destroying it completely. I hate to say this, but that was kind of anticlimactic. Also, even though Lysander is like basically dead, no one really seems to care. And that, my friends, is why you should never be a supervillain. Lastly, AZ, with his freedom back, goes back to wandering the land looking for his lost friend. Alright, Elite Four time now. Maybe my expectations for them are pretty low most of the time, but I find X and Y's pretty decent. Like in Black and White, they can be fought in any order. The one most fight first is Malva, an internet celebrity that uses fire types. Next, Wilkstrom, the night guy, who specializes in steel types. Then followed by Drasna, the dragon MILF, concluded by Cybold and his water types. Now comes the final fight with the champion, Dianthia. I just realized now that I didn't mention her at all up to this point in the script, but you can't really blame me. Her story just falls flat compared to Cynthia, or Blue, or Adler, or Steven. She serves an incredibly minor role in the story, only being in a cafe in Lumiway City while Lysander is trying to convince her to help him with his plan. After that, you kind of just forget about her. I mean, she's not a jerk or anything, and her backstory of being a movie star is, it's a cool backstory, I guess. Yeah, it doesn't make the same mark as previous champions, except for maybe Lance. Anyway, she has a great team of strong Pokemon, you know the drill. Despite not even trying to grind, my whole team got above level 70 for this battle. Pretty much all I did was turn the XP share back on, and yeah. I thought I wouldn't hurt at the point, but yeah, I leveled up way more than I thought I would, so I really wish I hadn't, or else this could have been the most fun and intense battle in the whole game. Instead, I completely and utterly destroyed her. Dianthia's signature Pokemon is her Gardevoir, level 68 with Mega Evolution. I was fully expecting it to take a few turns to take it out. Only no, I one-shot it with a Shadow Punch. Anticlimactic. Unlike every other game where everyone says thank you to the player after saving the world and that's that, here Calum, Serena, and everyone get a parade for stopping Team Flare. Towards the end of it, that AZ guy challenges the player to a battle, and after it, he shows some remorse for his actions thousands of years ago. His floaty finally returns to him too. It's a heartwarming ending to be sure, yet I wouldn't have minded if it ended with uncertainty. With the champion beat, it's time for the post-game. Although this time we have way less to go over. X and Y's post-game is kind of meh. Looker returns again, and there's a whole side quest where you're helping solve mysteries. Along the way, Looker lets this homeless girl Emma live in his office, which is a great recipe for having her career ruined by false accusations. She then gets experimented on by the last member of Team Flare to become this robotic entity that steals people's Pokemon. Eventually, you put an end to this, the dude gets arrested, and Looker leaves Kalos, giving his office to Emma. The Looker quest is by far the biggest part of the postgame. It has a different feel than the rest of the game entirely, so I regret not finding out about it until this playthrough. Next, Sycamore gives you a pass to go to Killoid City, where Serena can be refought daily, and it's also home to the Battle Mansion. Last of all are the post-game legendaries, and there are 3 of them, which isn't a lot, compared to there's only 4 total, and 2 of these 3 legendaries returned from Kano, meaning in total, there are only 3 brand new legendaries to this generation, which is a bit lacking. Hell, even Red and Blue had like 4 new to them. Let's start with the hardest to capture, the Roamer. I despise Roamers, yada yada yada. This Roamer is either Zapdos, Moltres, or Articuno, and it changes depending on what starter the player chose. At random, they can be found on a route, but this time, you don't even get 1 turn before they flee. Instead, they need to be encountered on routes 10 times, before eventually flying to the Sea Spirit's den. Here, the bird can finally be caught in a normal battle without them trying to run away or anything. A step up from how annoying most roamers are to catch, yet worse in some way since you can't use your Master Ball during the first encounter. The only other thing I have to note is my dumb luck catching of a Heal Ball. If anyone has seen Sugar Carnero's Let's Play of Crystal or finds a shiny coughing, I had a similar reaction to that. Zygarde is the last brand new legendary in Kalos. If Z was released, he probably would have been the box legendary, and would have had a bigger role in the story like Giratina or Quasha. But alas, Z never was, and Zygarde's only purpose is to wait in a cave to be caught. To finish off this grand adventure, the final legendary, well kind of because you can catch these guys in any order, lies in a deep cave. Mewtwo. Is this Gen 1 pandering? A bit. Even so, I'm glad Mewtwo came back. Catching him is a challenge as always, with his overpowered psychic moves and healing. But since my team was the strongest I've ever assembled in all my years up to this point, this battle isn't nearly as hard as it was in Red and Blue. X and Y, while nowhere close to my favorite Pokemon installment, aren't quite bad games. They introduce a lot to the mix, like being 3D, Mega Evolution, and all the side modes that I really don't care about. However, I do see why they're viewed as kind of meh, being way too easy and having a huge downgrade in story and characters. If Z was ever released, Gen 6 probably would have been seen a lot more positively, and probably would have added a lot more content like story and stuff, and would have upped the challenge a little. What's kind of weird though is how, from what I remember at least, X and Y were praised heavily when it came out in 2013, and it's only recently that they've been seen as mediocre, kind of like an inverse Black and White. And it was one of those games that I only saw glimpses of on other kids' 3DSs in the cafeteria in middle school, or from YouTube videos, and although I didn't get to play it until like 2 years ago, I still find the game a little nostalgic. If you want to play this game for yourself, I'd recommend buying it as soon as possible, since it's only going for 40 bucks on eBay right now, which is insanely cheaper than most ever installments. I doubt it's going to stay that way for long though, so if you're interested, don't wait too long. And with that, I bid you all adieu.